Hey folks, Tony here, and today we are once again back talking video games. Now I've got about a dozen games on my docket, things that I've played, that I've enjoyed, that I've really enjoyed, and that I've loved. There's no way I'm going to have time to talk about all of these games, so I'm trying to pick out a few, some ones that will require shorter discussions, and some ones that will require longer discussions, and just kind of start going to town on them. So we're gonna get started today with Jusant. Jusant is a action puzzle climbing game, as the developers describe it. We'll obviously talk more about that in a second. From developer and publisher Don't Nod. Now I'd like to give the folks over at Don't Nod a huge shout out. They were kind enough to send me over a copy of this game. So full disclosure, I did not pay for this game. They gave me a key to review, check out the game, and play it. If you are interested in picking up Jusant for yourself, there will be a link down in the description below. You can find the game over on Steam for $24.99. So, action puzzle climbing game. Let's break that down. As you can see from the gameplay you're watching, this is a climbing game. The puzzles that they speak of are simply the climbs themselves. This isn't a game trying to give you strange, really gamified climbing experiences. This is a game that in a lot of ways is trying to replicate the actual real-world act of climbing down to some of the mechanics and tools that we would find in climbing in real life. Now, I'm no expert on climbing by any means. I've seen enough of it. I've watched enough, videos of people climbing to at least see the resemblances here, and I imagine that that's what the studio is trying to do, to have some level of accuracy, right? Some level of authenticity, while eventually, as the player plays the game, starting to introduce new tools and new mechanics, some of which go outside the realm of reality to further spice up the puzzle portions of these climbs. It is, at the end of the day, a deeply satisfying experience no matter how you cut it. It just feels good to play. It is simple. It is straightforward. This is not a weird sort of physics-based climber where you're like waving your mouse in the air or mashing 16 keys on your keyboard. You plug in a controller. Left trigger is left hand, right trigger is right hand. You can jump in different directions. You can lay down additional batons to give yourself sort of secure points when going for risky jumps or risky sections of climbs. There's an entire tether system built into the game that makes use of tether points that were potentially installed by the previous occupants of this massive structure you are climbing. It just works. I realize what I've just said, but it does just work. You can climb very quickly once you get comfortable with the system. And the climbs you will do sometimes, and not even necessarily the difficult ones, it's just the way the climbs themselves are laid out. There's this really wonderful spectacle to them. It is a very beautiful game almost all of the time. Like, I can't get over how well this art style works. It, to me, does almost like border on that sort of generic, like, artsy art style, but they push it just enough into their own territory. They do some really good stuff with ambient effects work, with the audio design that just kind of brings it all together. I really do think the audio design has to be pointed out here. The sort of scuffing and slipping and gripping of your shoes and your hands on the various materials that exist within the world are done just well enough that they really make the actual action of climbing pop. It is a very satisfying experience. It's the thing that hooked me when I played the demo back during Next Fest, and it continues to be one of my favorite parts of the game here. But that is one of the two pieces that very much make up Jusant. I would say like 80% of the game is the climbing, is the gameplay, right? If you want to ignore the narrative stuff outside of the few cutscenes that there are, you can totally do that. You could just climb and enjoy the game mechanically, but there is a narrative here. There is a story to uncover, and it is very much done through sort of bits and pieces of letters, lore, if you will. This is going to be a sticking point for a lot of folks. I'm not the biggest fan of like reading notes and letters either. And when I played the demo, I totally skipped over all that stuff just to get a feel for the gameplay. But now that I have a copy of the full release, I decided to give it a shot, to actually read some of these entries, read these, what turned out to be bits of correspondence between the previous inhabitants of this location, and see if it would work for me. And you know what, it did. I actually think the writing is really well done. It's simple in the best possible way. The letters you're going to find as you ascend this environment are legitimate pieces of correspondence between the previous inhabitants. They are people talking about their everyday lives. They are talking with one another, sometimes on very personal levels. And as you continue the climb, you'll start to see people talking about their relationships with people on the low tide, potentially the lower parts of the structure. You'll see them talking about their futures in this place, a future that they may or may not have. And it's all just so personally written that I was really impressed with it. I mean, there's a reason that for generations and generations, people held on to letters from acquaintances, loved ones, family, friends. There will always be something of value about things that have been written to us by people we care about, especially once they're gone. And I think the writing here really tunes into that in a way that I found myself very easily interested in what had to be said. It also helps in obviously telling the story of these people that are now gone. And it's just a really well done part of the game. I don't know. I don't usually like this stuff, but I think they nailed it. And I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll stop talking about it now. That's Jusant. I honestly can't recommend it enough, especially if you're looking for a shorter game. I'm actually a pretty big fan of these smaller games that are really driven by what could be a very simple gameplay mechanic, but it's fleshed out. There's a ton of passion and time dedicated to making that mechanic feel good. Jusant is that. The climbing is that. All of the other little bits of narrative flavor, the world building you'll get to stumble your way through, those are all just icing on the cake for me. They did a great job with it. There's some other wonderful little treats here that I won't spoil for anybody who starts to play the game, but this is one that, if you're into this kind of thing and you got 25 extra bucks to spare for something you can get through in a weekend, I cannot recommend Jusant enough. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves out there. I'll see you in the next one.